Welcome to Roots of Politics, the channel for political education and political philosophy without ideological gymnastics. Why I'm not a leftist? Well, I used to be one, moderately left-wing back when I was young. At the time, the spirit of the age was leftist, and those on the right were mostly seen as dimwits and narrow-minded bourgeois types. Now, regardless of who's actually right, the left, the right, or someone else, back then, the left was intellectually compelling, even brilliant. That has changed dramatically. Today, what we see on the left is either the absurd leftist empire of Absurdistan, which I'll explain in a moment, or a complete intellectual wasteland held together only by an exaggerated sense of moral superiority. So, what is this leftist empire of Absurdistan? When I talk about it with friends and acquaintances, they just roll their eyes. They probably think I've completely lost it. But the leftist empire of Absurdistan really does exist. It has metastasized and now lives on in many people's minds, often without them realizing where their thoughts actually come from. This empire has not just one name, but two, because it consists of two provinces. One of them is a bit more reasonable and less absurd than the other, but that doesn't make it any better. The first province is called Neo-Marxism. It essentially wants the same thing old-school communism wanted, just via a different path. And we all know how those Marxist social experiments have ended, whether they had a neo in front or not. The other province, the more absurd one, is called Poststructuralism. No, it's not just one of those modern art movements. Well, maybe a little. It's the ideological root behind gender mainstreaming, post-colonialism, anti-racism activism, LGBTQ+, and so on. Let me give you an example. There was a French philosopher named Michel Foucault who had an enormous influence on the modern left. He claimed that everything, absolutely everything, even what we think throughout the day, is shaped by power structures. He believed the meaning of life was to resist these structures. He saw particular potential in sexual minorities. Foucault himself was gay. Starting to make sense? The LGBTQ+ movement isn't really about the rights of sexual minorities. It's about resistance. Resistance against the hated Western civilization. Ironically, that very civilization gave Foucault a rather comfortable life. Sexual minorities are merely a means to an end. They are being instrumentalized, and when it really matters, they are left behind. For example, when facing hostility from people who haven't been here that long. What are we supposed to call these groups in Germany these days? This is the common thread. The West is evil, 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 and must be destroyed. Of course, the West has done terrible things, but so has everyone else. The West practiced slavery, like many cultures, but it's the only civilization in history to have abolished slavery on its own. People are being told, if you want to be one of the good and smart ones, repeat our slogans. You have to stand up for sexual minorities and be passionately against racism. That's morally good, right? But that's not what it's about. Even those who came to power in Germany in 1933 told people they stood for good, and many believed them. Don't get me wrong. I think most political worldviews are legitimate, including leftist ones. But what the modern left is doing in practice reminds me of narcissistic personality disorder. A narcissist sees their own perspective as superior, infallible, morally elevated, logically unassailable. At the same time, they're hypersensitive to contradiction. Criticism isn't perceived as an argument, but as a personal attack. And that fits a large part of the political left today. Their own position is morally inflated. Alternative views aren't different opinions, but outright evil. The political opponent is not just wrong, but demonized and dehumanized. These narcissistic patterns often stem from a lack of self-worth. Political ideology becomes a substitute identity. It provides security, meaning, and the feeling of being on the right side of history. Anyone who criticizes it threatens this fragile self-image. So, criticism must be suppressed through moralizing, cancel culture, and thought policing. Another aspect is control. Narcissistic characters want a world that affirms their self-image. For that, language, media, culture, even history must be reprogrammed. The result? Not pluralism, but monopoly of opinion. Not dialogue, but ideological dictatorship. Not freedom, but forced identification. Not with me. Of course, not all leftists are like that. But for their own sake, the sane ones should call their comrades to moderation. They might still listen to internal criticism. They've long since become immune to any critique from outside.